Okay, today we're gonna read scene 3, and so we're starting on page 37. We will have Kyle.
Seriously.
Chorus.
That's and the long part.
What?
Airly. Creon.
Kyrie girl.
There's no girls in this.
So
Where are we starting at on
I haven't done.
Do I move my part right there?
No.
I'm
You
gonna
can
be.
stand
I'm
on
gonna
your
be
2
Heyman.
feet.
I'll be Heyman.
Otherwise, I need to tell your football coaches you need more training because you can't stand up for. Then you can stand up.
Yeah, we can't stand because we've had too much drinking.
You're not in good enough shape to stand up for 35 minutes.
35 minutes.
Well, yeah, you can.
Where are we starting on that?
37, very top.
Yes.
37.
Yours.
Okay, go this way a little bit.
You guys gotta be in the camera.
You're at the top of page 37. That's you.
Harmonize, ready?
But here is Hyman, that's me.
Hyman is his name.
But here is Hyman, the last and youngest of your children. Does he come in grief for the fate of intended bride? The maid Antigone is mourning for the bed he has cheated out of.
We will soon know better than predictions. Son, can it be that you have heard my final vote and come to fight your father for your bride? Or am I your friend, whatever I do?
Okay, why has Hyman showed up here? Remember?
Yes. Because it's that's Creon's son, which is Antigone.
It's Creon's son, which is Antigone's
husband.
betrothed, the man, the fiance. She's supposed to be marrying him. So the chorus says, why has he come? To argue with his father or to express his mourning? So Creon says, I don't know, we're going to find out. And now Hyman expresses the why he has shown up here.
Father, I am yours, and as you have me, you guide the best course for me to follow. No marriage will ever be more important for me than justly carrying out your precepts.
So why has he come here?
He's saying that like marriage isn't as important to him as his father.
The most important thing for him to do as a son of the king is to follow whatever he says.
Oh, snap.
Okay.
And that, child, is how you ought to keep your affections. Stand by your father's ideas in all things. This is why a man prays to have obedient children in his house, that they may take vengeance on their father's enemy in bad times and honor his friends as he himself does. But whoever sires, unless children,
Useless.
But whoever sires useless children, what could you say except he has created problems for himself and much laughter for his enemies? My boy, never give up your wits for a woman because of pleasure, knowing that this darling becomes cold in your arms, your wife a wicked concubine in your house. And what could be worse than a bad friend?
Okay. So, Creon responds to Hyman by saying, good boy. Exactly.
Good boy.
Of all the people that you could choose over your father, the worst would be a
Girl.
woman.
Gross.
Then he says, that is a man's best gift, is to have obedient children. Line 659. Never give up your wits for a woman because of pleasure, knowing that this darling becomes cold in your arms, a wicked concubine in your own house.
So, isn't he like basically just contradicting himself? Because he says that that's a man's best dream to have obedient children. Well, that's what Antigone's trying to do, be obedient to her family.
Yes, but not in his eyes.
Yeah, he's not.
Okay,
Okay.
what does Creon feel about women?
They're bad.
They need to have no power.
Yeah, they're useless.
Okay,
They need to be.
he's alluding to this thing that apparently happened in his own marriage, which is when he first got married, his wife was really
Old.
Like wicked? Or like good at first and then it was like
yeah, like good, like
Yeah, we're married. dude.
interested in him and wanted to provide pleasure for him.
The birds
But-
and the bees.
Later, she becomes cold in your arms.
Like she doesn't want to.
Yes.
Not.
And apparently, Creon is speaking from his own experiences. So, his advice for women is to do what? Line 564.
Therefore, spit her out like an enemy, and let her find a husband in hell. Since I caught her, alone of all entire people, in open rebellion, I will not make myself a liar to the city, but kill her. So let her call on Zeus of kinship. For if I nurture defiance in my relatives, I'd surely have to for those outside my clan.
Okay, so now he gets down to the root, the real root of why he's going to follow through with his edict, which is what?
To kill her.
Kill Antigone.
But why is he going to follow through with it?
Because it says, if I nurture defiance in my relatives, I'd surely have to for those outside my clan, so he has to, like,
He has to treat everyone.
Stand.
He's a man
Yeah.
of his word.
Unless they
Okay.
have-
Doesn't matter. If
Couple
there's-
things that you guys said that are correct. He has to show himself as a man of his word. Okay? He has to treat everyone equal. If he shows sympathy for his family, that's going to be a crack in his armor. And one crack in his armor could bring
Destroy
down the
reputation.
whole fort. Okay. Go ahead.
whoever is a good man at home is shown to be just in the city too. But whoever goes outside the laws or violates them, or thinks to give commands to his superiors, this man will not meet praise from me. Rather, whomever the city chooses must be obeyed in all things, small, just, and the opposite. And this man, I would wager, rules fairly, and would want to be ruled well. And when marshaled under a cloud of spears, he would stand a good and just fighter in front of ranks. No evil is worse than disobedience. This one thing destroys cities, turns homes upside down. It leads to the rout of allied armies, while those who live uprightly are saved by obedience. Therefore, rulers must be supported, and we must not yield to woman. It would be better, if it had to be, to fall at a man's hands, and not to be called worse than a woman.
Okay. So what are the things that make a good man according to Creon? Find a line from this passage that supports that. What does he consider a good man, Casey?
We must not yield to women.
Okay, we must not yield to women, line 689. Another one, Airly.
680, it says, and this man, I would wager, rules fairly, and would want to be ruled well.
Okay, so a good man would rule fairly and would also want to be ruled. Okay, another one.
Under a cloud of spears he would stand.
Okay, under a cloud of spears he would stand. So he will not shrink away from difficult situations. What else?
A good fighter.
Evil is worse than disobedience.
Okay, so he would be obedient. He would be a good and just fighter. And Creon uses the word just quite frequently. What is he talking about? Why does he use the word just? Okay, like justifiable. What's another word that has that same root? Justice. So justified means what?
You have to do it.
There's a reason for it and a good reason for it.
Okay, there's like a good reason for it. So if you get kicked out of school, it needs to be justifiable, right? There needs to be some concrete evidence and a very clearly stated rule in the handbook that explains why you can be kicked out of school. Okay? What does justice mean?
It will always do what's right.
Okay, it comes back to this concept of what is right. The Supreme Court of the United States has 9 judges who we refer to as justices. Their job is to uphold the Constitution. So whenever a court case comes before the Supreme Court justices, they look at the Constitution and they decide if the law is in violation or in accordance with the Constitution. Does this person have justice in whatever their case is? So are they right or are they wrong? Now, one of the problems with the idea of justice is morality. Okay? So I'm going to take you back to a very famous court case from a long time ago, 1965, I believe. The court case that was seen in the Supreme Court was Brown versus Board of Education. There was this family, their last name was Brown. They were suing a school board who would not allow their black children to attend school. There were laws in place in this county and state that prevented these children from attending the same school as the white students. So this case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had to decide, what did the Constitution say?
All men created equal.
Okay, the Constitution says, that's actually the Declaration, but it still kind of counts, okay? Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator, meaning God, with certain rights. And among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the family in Brown versus Board of Education said, by not allowing my children to attend school, you're taking away their rights. In the Bill of Rights, it says that all Americans are entitled to free education. Well, the school board in this case said, yeah, they can. We're giving them busing to the school down the road. Do you know where down the road was? About 70-mile drive. On a bus that didn't show up every day. In a school that did not have equal educators. Like, it had the people that regular schools wouldn't hire. And the parents of these kids said, that is not an equal education. That's not equal access to education. And in the end, the Supreme Court agreed that those black children were not allowed equal access to education. Okay? There have been other court cases. Like, for instance, more recently, the issue of marriage between same-sex couples. According to the Constitution, all men are created what? Equal. And actually, it should really say all men and women. All people, let's say. All people are created equal, and all people should have the same rights. That's what the Constitution says, correct? So when the Supreme Court heard the case of whether or not, and actually it's not about marriage. That's not what the Supreme Court's dealing with. It's about if two women are married, can they, does their insurance, if I have spouse insurance and I'm married to a woman and my state doesn't cover same-sex marriage, and so we're not legally married in this state, does the state have to provide us married insurance?
No.
Well, the Supreme Court says all people are created equal, which means that the states cannot discriminate you based on
Your
sexuality, gender, age, or race. So does the state have to honor my marriage for insurance purposes? The answer is yes. That's what the Constitution says. That's inarguable. But the problem that we come into with justice is, how do our feelings come into play? Because some people feel that same-sex marriage is immoral. It goes against their feelings, what they personally believe is right and wrong. Remember I asked you to think about this before we started reading? How much are you willing to sacrifice for what you feel is right versus what the law says is right? Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay? And that's what Creon is talking about here. That in his case, do we know how he feels about Antigone? Do we know how he feels about having to execute his niece?
He pretty
his.
bad about it.
Yeah, he doesn't like it.
He doesn't want to.
He
doesn't
doesn't
like it.
like it.
Okay, we don't really know. We're kind of guessing here about how he feels, but he has taken his feelings out of the equation because his job here isn't to feel about anybody. His job is to do the thing that he said he was going to do. And those are choices sometimes that a leader has to make. All right. On the opposite of this idea of justice is everything else, being disobedient. And he feels that disobedient people are like the scum of the earth. Okay, obedience is at the top of his list of things that make a person good. All right, chorus, page 38.
To us at least, if we are not deceived by age, you seem to speak what you say wisely.
Father, the gods endow human beings with intelligence, which is the greatest of all possessions. I don't know how I could say you don't speak correctly, but sometimes another man's opinion is also right. You, however, cannot watch everything that people say or do or blame for the common man. Out of fear, your face won't say such words as you would not rejoice to hear. But I can hear these things in darkness. How the city weeps for this girl. She says the least worthy of all women to die so badly for such noble deeds.
Okay. Hyman is using some really, really good persuasive techniques here. And as soon as we finish reading this, we're going to be talking about persuasion. I'm going to bring you back to this moment. When you want someone who is very stuck in their ways, very stubborn, to listen to you, one of the best ways that you can do that is to acknowledge how they are
How they think they're
right. So that's what Hyman does. He says, as your son, I could never go against what you say. I couldn't. But other people also have opinions. And their opinions may also be
Better.
Like
or bad.
valid.
valid, right? They could be correct. In this case, whose opinion is Hyman bringing to Creon?
All the other men,
His
like
people.
the choruses.
His people, like the commoner, the men, the people who live in the city of Thebes. And what are the people of the city of Thebes talking about right now?
How they feel bad for him.
They feel bad for Antigone. They are weeping that she would suffer such a horrible fate. Okay, go on.
She didn't let her brother who had fallen in combat lie unburied to be devoured by some ravenous dog or bird. They ought to give her an award, so the report spreads in darkness. When you do well, Father, I have no more honored possession than that. For what prize is greater for children than a father's fame when he's prospering, or a son's for his father?
Okay, pause. So he says, the people in the city are on whose side? Antigone's. How is that dangerous for a leader?
Because they
Because
can
they
like
are
find
on the side of a person
Right.
that's the bad
Okay,
against the
they
good.
could very easily rebel against him. When you are doing something as emotionally charged as executing the princess of the city, because that's what she is, and everybody in the city is against you, you're putting yourself as a leader in a very vulnerable situation. Now, Hyman says, when you do well, Father, I am no more honored than that. So seeing your father prosper reflects well on Hyman. The reverse is also true. If his father suffers,
Yeah.
he suffers. And who's going to become the leader of the city after Creon? Him. So if Creon gets assassinated by his people, what does that leave for Hyman? Good situation, bad situation?
Probably a bad one.
Bad, very bad. People are going to think that he is probably on his
Father.
Other side.
father's side, and he just has this city that's in uproar that he has to try to put back together. Yeah, and it's going to be, neither one of those will be good situations for him. Okay, line 7:18.
Prospering or a son for his father. Don't be so stubborn that you say you and you alone are right. Whoever thinks that he's the only one who can think or use his tongue or soul, no one else. These men, when you open them up, are so seen to be hollow. But for men to learn, even a wise man, is nothing shameful, nor to learn to bend and give way. You see how in the winter storms the trees yield, that save even their twigs. But those who oppose it are destroyed, root and branch. Just so the captain who never slackens his sail, once he stretched it, gets his boat turned, and the sails rest with benches upside down. Rather yield your anger and let yourself change. Even though I'm young, a good idea might come from me. It would be best by far that man be born full of all the knowledge there is, but if it usually happens not to turn out that way, to learn from those who speak well and good substitute.
Okay, there is a metaphor in this passage that Kerrigan just read that we have heard before. What is it?
Winter storm.
Okay, first of all, we have the motif of storms up again. What else?
The boat.
Captain.
The boat, the ship, another motif repeated, and one more. What metaphor is Hyman using to describe his father?
Stubborn.
Okay, he's saying he's stubborn by describing him as or comparing him to a.
Well, it said, "Don't be so stubborn that you say you and you alone are right." Is that what you're talking about?
Okay, so he says, don't be so stubborn as to think that you and you alone are right. Then he compares him to something.
So he's hollow.
Keep going.
Even a wise man is nothing shameful.
The trees.
The trees. He says, the trees that yield save even their twigs. The ones who do not yield are broken. And I just finished reading a book, really good one if you like outdoorsy kind of books. It's called My Side of the Mountain. And this boy is living in the forest, and there's an ice storm, a really bad ice storm. And he wakes up the next morning, and he hears this, like, explosion. It was a tree that had been iced over, and the weight of the branches being covered in ice causes the whole tree to literally implode.
Like,
So instead of
actually,
blowing up this way, it it crumples down into itself. Imagine what that would sound like. A huge tree. What kind of trees survive ice storms?
Oak trees.
The ones whose branches bend with the pressure of the ice. So the oak trees, the ones that have really stiff branches, what happens to them? They break off. What happens to the evergreen or the weeping willow where the branches can sag?
The ice slides.
The ice sags with it, and when the ice melts, the branches
Spring
come back up. Which one of those should Creon be like?
The
The like weeping willow.
The pine tree, the one that can come back up.